Cool. So, moving on. One thing that we
Uh,
talked about. Oh, is this?
well, yeah, you were asking about like other changes we might make before we push to.
Oh yeah. Is there
The
anything
one
else?
thing we haven't really talked about when it comes to plutonium is the current discussion regarding the nitrogen and the bauxite usage in that production chain,
Right.
which is kind of the current problem that people are looking at. Which was also kind of the issue that they were looking at before, but that is kind of the remaining problem now with the balancing, is that you need a lot of nitrogen and a lot of bauxite to actually get all the plutonium fuel rods out of your, out of the uranium basically. And I'm not super out on it yet, and I'm not sure how much people in the chat are aware of the problem there. I think basically you can kind of, what do you call that? Ground down, simplify the discussion by saying that there are a bunch of players that think it's bad that plutonium requires these limited resources that you also want to use for high-end production.
Right.
Because it limits them right from making high-end production and having the maximum amount of power available in their factory at the same time. So they have to kind of do this trade-off between the two. Which was kind of intentional because I wanted to change the end game approach from kind of having to balance these different things to each other. Which is also a reason that we made the bauxite more accessible, because then the bottleneck started becoming more other resources at certain points. So then you would have to make decisions if you want to use maybe less quartz in certain parts, like not using the computer alternate recipe that uses the crystal oscillators to save that quartz for more bauxite production for the what's it called now? The turbo motor. Getting those different trade-offs, and one of those trade-offs as well was the power versus high-end production, that you kind of have to limit them to each other. You can't do both at max, you have to split that. But some players don't think that is fun, it seems. So I'm still looking into that and seeing what the best course of action is.
Yeah, I guess.
And of course that's a hard part, because there might be a lot of players that do think this might be a fun approach to the end game, to balance those two things to each other.
Yeah, I guess it kind of like speaks for itself in the way that like we have a limited amount of resources on the map, and like it feels like maybe this is, I'm speaking from my own perspective, but it, like whenever I play, it feels like no, I have infinite resources because the nodes are infinite, but you really do have to like at some point it feels like when you played for a long time and you reach that end game, you realize that there is a like you hit a wall essentially, and maybe it's not like, yeah, and then you hit that point where like you have to make a decision whether like you want to spend the nodes on making turbo motors, or if you want to get more power or whatever you want to do with that. So that's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's just a vision problem in the end of like what is the best for the game, because it is made for, of course, these hardcore players that want to go that route of actually trying to maximize everything.
Yeah.
And of course they're theorizing about it now, but if they ever would want to build it, they want to have a solution for how can I approach the maximum potential of high tier parts and maximum potential of power to actually achieve such a factory. I think currently it's stable enough that you can do both of them, but of course not to their maximum potential, because you're limited by one or the other. The thing that we kind of have to decide is if it is more fun for those players to have to deal with that issue, or if it's not.
Right.
And currently, the people that are actually talking about it seem to be of the opinion that it's not more fun to do it. What I'm always concerned about with these kind of topics is that the players that are maybe content with it, or at this point not aware of it, are not talking about it, because it's not a worry to them, right? It's not frustrating them.
Yeah, it all goes back to the thing we talked about previously, where the people that we interact with and give us feedback about this are maybe not the best representation of what everybody, like the main player base, cares about. We're interacting with the hardcore people and the people that like are knee deep inside his factory.
And I just kind of find that it's the hardcore people talking about this issue, because it's kind of a balancing challenge that's made for them.
Yeah.
But that's why it's also fine that if the majority of them agrees that it's not fun to have to do that to have to solve that problem, then we will probably change it. Or
Cool.
we kind of have to change it at that point because it is there for them, right? It's supposed to be fun for them.
Yeah.